Guess what, wise ones? We've got another giveaway for you. I am so freaking excited to be able to gift you a seasonal blend of high garden teas and a mug handmade by me. High garden teas are my very favorite. They are healing, grounding, and nurturing, and I've been in love with them ever since I lived in Nashville. And after you listen to this episode with herbalist of High Garden, Leah Larabell, you're going to want these blends even more. So all you have to do to enter to win is leave a review for this podcast, preferably a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you want a bonus entry, go ahead and follow at Holly Zazier and at High Garden Tea on Instagram.
Everybody's learning. Everybody's growing. Everybody's got to start somewhere. How the wise one grows.
Hi, wise ones, and welcome back to How the Wise One Grows. Today we have a really special guest from one of my favorite tea shops in the world, or tea companies in the world, Leah Larabell. But before we get started and have this lovely conversation, let's take a moment to land together. So just let yourself find stillness. If it's safe, you can gently rest your eyes, or just soften your gaze at a point in front of you. And notice where your body meets the earth. Let your spine lengthen and your shoulders soften. Inhale, fill your chest, fill your belly with air. Exhale, open your mouth, let it all out. Inhale, fill the chest, fill the belly with air. Exhale, open your mouth, let it all go. One more inhale. And exhale. And you can slowly open your eyes as you return to the space and just notice how you feel right now. So today we get to hang out with Leah. And Leah Larabell is a trained clinical level herbalist practicing for over 20 years. She holds a master's degree in counseling and psychology, which enhances her work as an ecotherapist. She is the co-owner of High Garden Tea with her husband, and possibly most of all, a nature-loving tree hugger, conservationist, wife, mother, and daughter. She has been taught by renowned herbal elders as well as Mother Nature herself, and finds great purpose in sharing the herbalism tradition with those seeking. It's her goal to put plant wisdom and connection back into as many homes as possible. Leah and her husband Joel are passionate about forest conservation and save a large percentage of profits from their social enterprise, High Garden Tea, to purchase and preserve forested land through conservation easements and land trusts. She is a forever student of the land and eternally grateful for the lessons, medicine, food, shelter, and belonging. Thank you so much for joining today, Leah. I'm so excited that I get to connect with you.
Oh my gosh, the pleasure is all mine, Holly.
So I shared this with you a moment ago, but I lived in Nashville for a little bit, and High Garden was this like sanctuary I stumbled into. I remember it was a no screens place. You had these beautiful colored pencils that were made out of you could just tell it was like real wood from the trees, and I would bring my coloring book or just my sketch pad and go in and let that be my healing space with one of your the teas are very medicinal and very intentional. So you could kind of be like, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what I need. Be served a lovely cup of that. And then it just became this lovely healing space for me. So I'm just so excited. And right now I'm sipping on one of Leah's teas, which is Lift. So I feel like I have a part of it with me right now.
Yes. Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious because I don't know many herbalists, but I've been listening to your podcast, which is it's Sipping Teas and Hugging Trees, and I have been obsessed with it. I just think it's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could share a bit about what herbalism is and maybe how you came across that in your life.
I'm so glad you asked that. As I have evolved as an herbalist over the years, this answer would have changed many, many times.
Mm.
But I'm going to give you my most up-to-date answer.
I like that. That's how it
Yeah,
flows.
in 10 years, it may be different. And that's what's so beautiful about herbalism. There is no end goal. There is no end goal. You're always learning, always growing, always connecting. Um, Herbalism, for as long as people have been walking this earth on the earth walk, we have been being fed by plants and we have been healed by plants. They've been our food, our medicine, they've been our shelter, they've been our beds. They've taken care of us always. And so there's this beautiful connection that always has been. And there were plant folk in every um, family, within every piece of life. There was plant folk, and then there were the healers. There were the plant healers that in different communities and so forth. And there was a deep connection, and that was herbalism. That is speaking with the plants, that is working with the plants, that is understanding that plants are living beings, and the medicine that we're pulling from them, that is their own medicine. Plants are living beings that make their own food, that make their own medicine, that when an insect bites them, they know what insect that is and amp up a constituent that insect doesn't like to shoo it away or to call in its predator. Plants are extremely complex. And so that's the medicine that we're putting inside of our bodies because we're evolving alongside of them. But it got changed as far as in Western culture as so people move, take over, whatever we want to call it, this land. The indigenous folks were the true herbalists of this land. And they knew the plants. They'd stood beside the plants. They talked to the plants. And it started with who were known as the Thompsonians in the late 1700s, started to twist herbalism into what I'm afraid we see a little bit more of today. That was taking this indigenous knowledge and it's ripping the culture out of it, ripping the roots out of it, ripping the spirituality out of it, and trying to compete with what was modern medicine at that time. So modern medicine, granted, and I do say this, was a hot mess. It was like bleeding people out or giving them opium, and so it was called botanic physicians and the botanic movement. And so they used plants as medicine alternatives. And they started, trying to give it very medical terms and turning it into kind of an herbal drug of sorts. That's what's been kind of brought forward a little bit in herbalism. And that's why you see like a competition between herbalism and drugs, or a competition between herbalism and modern medicine, or people thinking of like mullein is like nature's mucinex. None of that is true. None of that. They're two very different modalities. So herbalism as a whole is being in companionship with the plant, realizing that the words spoken over a cup of tea and the thanks given when you're gathering that plant are just as important as what you're sipping when you're bringing that plant into your body. Understanding that there is no one size fits all herb for everyone. St. John's wort isn't the happy herb for everybody, St. John's wort will have a different relationship with everyone. So what is herbalism?
A loaded question, maybe.
Yeah, it is something that has unfortunately died a little bit, but I hope is being brought back. Deep, true herbalism as it was when people truly practiced herbalism and ego was out of it. It's working with plants as the companions that they are, asking them for healing, giving thanks. Herbalism can be as simple as you need it to be, like grabbing a little bit of sage out of the cabinet and for a sore throat, or going out and gathering a little bit of plantain and chewing it up and putting it on a bee sting. But with every moment of that, recognizing that it's the plant doing the healing and giving thanks for it, and then connecting yourself back to nature to offer as much as you can back to those plants. There's a long answer.
Well, I love that, and I think it really hones in on it's this relationship with the earth. And
Mhm.
I think that in your podcast you guys spoke really beautifully about like these are your friends out in nature and like learning who they are, building a relationship with them. It's not like a taking because you wouldn't just take things from your friend either. It's like, how can we, like, what can I give back to you as I'm doing this? How can we honor one another in this relationship to coexist? And I think honoring like the way that this practice has evolved is really important too. So I really appreciate you naming too, like the indigenous people who had this different relationship with it than we do now, to make sure that we're kind of honoring that as well and looking back on that.
And to learn. And I mean, Appalachian folk herbalism is my specialty. And Appalachian folk is a blend of, it was African American at the time, indigenous, and then the poor Celtic folks like indentured servants and so forth. It was those who were tending to themselves. That's Appalachian folk herbalism. And it was almost tried to be beaten out of them, but they held on to it for us and we're fortunate enough to carry it forward today. But yeah, recognizing where this wisdom came from is so important. And to get back to the roots, I think that's what we're most at risk in herbalism. And I'm really finding a lot of passion in right now is to not allow herbalism to keep getting stripped and stripped and stripped from the culture and the spirit to just becoming a shell of itself. We're not just competing with modern medicine. We're not trying to do that. They're two different things and they can work so beautifully alongside one another.
Yeah.
When you let each stand on their own and their full potential.
Yeah, I love that and how it's seen as like it doesn't have to be either or with modern medicine or
No,
herbalism. It can be like a yes, and we can use both modalities to find what works for each individual and what they need as they experience a wide range of things in this life, both physically and mentally.
absolutely, absolutely.
Um, how did you first get interested in herbalism? How did that unfolding happen for you?
What would have seemed like a curse for so many years. When I was about 5, I started having what they thought was chronic urinary tract infections, and I I would be in so much pain. Even for me to go to a little sleepover would just be a no-go because I'd be calling by midnight being like, I'm hurting, mama.
Oh,
Yes, I remember almost missing my first prom and just sitting in a hot bath for comfort, and they could never answer what it was. And when I finally did get the answer by age of 18, they
wow.
called it interstitial cystitis. And it's an autoimmune like condition that the inside of your bladder inflames and so forth. So it's very painful. And when I got that diagnosis, I was so excited, but then I was equally disappointed when I was told, and there's not much we can do about it.
Yeah.
ASO standards over the counter was about the best I could get, or some pretty extreme measures at the time that thank goodness I didn't get because it would have actually made it worse. Like the rounds of antibiotics that they gave me made it much worse.
Mm.
But I went to a woman. Her name was Lisa Bedner. She was the closest herbalist that I could find. I'm so glad that I went to her, and she taught me about plants and plant medicine. It was kind of like I just knew as I was coming into this age at 18, there was just something that I knew the plants had the answer for me. And I don't know why. I don't come from a line of herbalists. And so I want
Yeah.
people to know that too. You don't have to come from a line of herbalists to be able to do this. But the plants were calling for me nonetheless. And I went to her, and after working with her, and she took me in as kind of a understudy. After about 2 months, I got the first true relief that I'd gotten in my whole life.
Wow.
And so I was that what seemed like a curse was actually a blessing because I never had to question if herbs worked. They were the
You
only
knew it.
thing. They were
Yeah.
the only thing that had ever worked for me. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so for the longest, I just used, to be honest with you, used them, as kind of an alternative medicine. And that gave me relief. And I never even considered being an herbalist or anything like that. It was just what I put into my body. And I was so appreciative. I slowly developed and honed and evolved and then I found relationship with the plants. I found
Mm.
deep relationship with the plants and saw them as companions and healers and guides. And that's when I became an herbalist. I've done tons of studies and programs and been fortunate to study with some of the most amazing herbalists in the country. But it truly was the trees. I remember teaching me that, hey, we're not just your medicine, we're your people,
Yeah.
and everything changed for me at that moment as an
How did
herbalist.
that happen for you? Like, how did that shift in relationship evolve from I'm using these to we now have relationship with these healing medicines?
As a lot of things happen when I was down. Sometimes some
Mm.
of your greatest growth comes when you have to stand back up.
Yeah.
Um, I was using herbs and I was even using them for other people at that time. I'd been
Mm-hmm.
practicing for or studying and everything for it was almost 10 years at that point, maybe 8. And I was in an unhealthy relationship and I was even taking antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was driving trying to escape, that feeling of I don't want to be here, maybe I want to be there, maybe I want to be there,
Yes.
and I was
Mm-hmm.
driving in my car trying to find where I might want to be.
Yeah.
And I was driving, I was like, I just want to feel loved.
Mm.
I was in one of those unhealthy relationships that make you question even if you love yourself. And I just wanted to be loved. And I was driving on the interstate. And I will never forget, next to a gas station, there was a little empty-ish field, and there were 3 trees over there. And I glanced over, and it was like they were just like, oh, just this thing. I had to get over there. I have no idea whose
Yeah.
land it was, but I had to get over there. And I pulled off, probably in a very unsafe way, jetted across the interstate. And I got over there to those trees, and I was like, what is it? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd not plant spoke before or nothing, but I knew I had to. And I just stood there for a second, and they were like, I love you. I always have. And it was the most unconditional love because those trees were probably 300 years old, 200 years old, and these elders that had lived so much longer than me and will hopefully live much longer than me were there. And I'd never felt such unconditional, wise, even I don't have a word for it. Our English language is very limited. It's more
Yeah.
commerce driven. It wasn't even love didn't feel like a big enough word, but it's the
Mm.
best word that I have. And from that moment forward, I was like, I will never use you again.
Yeah. So it kind
But
of
I will.
changed the way you saw them. Like you could feel something deeper and you really listened to I love that you listened to something in your intuition. There was like no like premeditated plan like, today I will speak to the trees. It was like there's just this calling that pulled you into that space and you were willing to listen to that and step into that.
Yeah, and I have worked in psychology for years, and I can't help but think because we have the head brain, we have the heart brain, and we have the
Mhm.
gut brain. They're 3 truly different brains. They all are very important. The heart brain and the gut brain can be in a bit of atrophy because our head brain tends to take over, but there is something very shifting in those our hard times in life. When you're almost in survival instinct,
Yeah.
and I can't help but think that's when gut brain and heart brain are really kind of, that instinct of survival and just broken hearted and wide open kind of thing, where you can actually seem to sometimes get those messages a little clearer in those
Yeah.
times when you're not just in normal drive mode of head brain.
I would definitely agree with that. I feel like the times of darkness in my life are when I get to know myself the deepest. It's like
Yeah.
you're almost just more willing to listen to that. Maybe when
Mhm.
like life is just kind of more steady, you're like, "Okay, brain, this is logical. This is what we do, blah blah blah."
Mhm.
But when it all just is in that ugh, like I don't even have a word for it, just that like heavy place, that dark place. You're like just willing to listen and take more chances and those things that have always been inside of you, you're more willing to step into.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, you don't necessarily want to get to those times because they're not,
Yes.
it's not fun, but
No.
there's definitely gifts in them.
Yeah.
So that's all.
So you shared in your bio, and I think you talked a lot about this in your podcast, how herbalism and nature help you find more belonging. And I feel like that story really resonates with that as well. But do you mind just sharing with others like how we can find, like, step out of loneliness, feel community within nature, and seeing that as a part of, like, these are parts that we can connect with as well. It doesn't always have to be human people where you can find that belonging.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we forget sometimes that we are nature.
Yes.
We are nature. And so what's happened is, I'm not sure. I mean, we can look back and there's some pieces where you can put together, but it's like humans have done everything they can to separate themselves from the other parts of nature. And now it is the most extreme version, I think, imaginable. Like you're driving through, either getting fast food or going picking up food at the grocery store, never even seeing some of these. Some kids are like, that's what broccoli looks like in the ground,
Yeah.
some adults. And then you're in this home that's like these four walls, that's not even fresh air, and you're going to your business or you're working on your computer. And even when people finally step outside, I watch them, I'll get them outside and they'll start like scratching or feeling their ankles, or like you can see this uncomfortableness wash over them to even just be in it for a second, in the grass
Yeah.
or something. And but yet we're so unhealthy. We are so unhealthy. This hasn't worked. And what's happened is we've isolated ourselves. It's kind of like, and it's to a point of anxiety and depression it's like we've cut off some of our limbs and we're just this tiny piece of what we are as a whole. Like we've cut off so much that makes us whole. And other than that, and there's just this kind of knowing of like, something's just not right, like I don't feel complete. And you need all of nature. You need your whole self and connected to it to feel whole. And so it's just so important. And then once you return into that, you're also not restricted to only having one species for community. Like people make good companions, obviously it's our species, but we each have our own agendas and have our own needs and have our own egos. And so the relationships are very limited. And it can be difficult to feel completely fulfilled by other people sometimes. We need to reach out for all those other relationships, to go to those tree beings that have been here long before us and will be here long after us, and stand in one place. And there's a certain amount of strength you go when you sit next to a tree being, or to look out there and watch a mama bird do her very best to build that nest and care for her babies, and realize she cares just as much as you do, like to see all of this in nature. And to understand, like, crows are smarter than your 3-year-old.
Your episode on
like,
crows blew my mind.
Right. It was some of it's like, what? He's smarter
What
than
they
my
do at
child.
the stoplights, how they drop their
incredible.
nuts so you'll drive over it and then open it for them, and I was just mesmerized.
Me too. And then all of a sudden I had this aha moment of like, why? I couldn't survive out in the wild. You are. Why would I think I'm so much smarter than you? You know what I mean? Having this moment of like, of course you're smart. Sometimes our intelligences may look different. And then when we validate how intelligent everything is around us, like trees are highly intelligent. They literally communicate with one another through volatile oils and the mycological system. They actually communicate, and so do plants. Then you can start realizing like actual communication can happen. They can speak to me. We grew up at plants' feet. And we speak that language. Like, why do you think lavender calms you? Why does the scent of oranges, like it's some of that instinctive language. There's little bits that we still remember. And then also, like, why does it feel so good to have a dog or a cat?
Mm-hmm.
and your relationships can be so much even bigger than that. And so that's that kind of wholeness. But people need to remember that to be complete, we first of all don't need to fear nature, which is one step. A ton, like it's been really instilled in a lot of us to fear nature, and that's
Yeah.
one of the most dangerous states of mind that we can be in.
And that's fearing ourselves. When we're fearing nature,
Yes,
it's like I'm not willing to love all of the parts of me, and that's just such a dangerous thing. But
absolutely.
I love that you see that we need nature in order to be whole because they are us and they are a part of
Hmm.
us. And for
Hmm.
me, like trees have always been my thing that I'm like, ah, like trees and rocks. I'm like, there's something here. And I remember when I was in college, right when I found out I got a scholarship to get my yoga teacher training, and I was so excited. And I had a friend who that night when we found out, we went and sat under this tree, and she was like, we were just listening to the trees and the wind was blowing, and she was like, look, they're cheering for you. And now whenever I'm in nature or trying to figure something out, I really try to notice, like, what are the leaves doing right now? Like, I feel like the way they sway can be a celebration or a calming, and just those little subtleties we can listen to and tap into. It's all around us. It's just that opening your eyes to see it, and being willing to think, like, yeah, communication can look different.
Absolutely. And that's an advanced thought for you in the herbalism world. It's long been thought that when you really need a plant or a plant's trying to reach out to you for medicine or companionship or something, the leaves may shake or it'll make a little sound. And you,
Really?
yeah, that's you're right on track there.
Ah, I'm so excited now. Well, I loved your episode on pines as well, and there was something you said there that really resonated with me about how, like, having just one pine is great, but for a pine to grow its best, or a tree to grow its best, it needs to be around other trees too. It needs that community, and also the relationship we have and the way they can support us is stronger when they're in community. And it reminded me of that for myself on a lot of levels too. Like, I think with COVID and the world being so virtual now, I definitely miss that human connection. It was kind of a reminder for me, like, yeah, the trees need community to grow their best, and I do too. And sometimes, maybe if I can't have that with another human being when I really need it, I can step out into the woods in my backyard and feel community in that way as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a reason people were being called out during that time of isolation. It was the other part, like it was their inner knowing, like, come outside, come be with us. Like we
Mm-hmm.
can be your community too. It's just, it was so far from where m- most people were to like think of like, oh, it's my community calling me out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of bird watching started taking place, and a lot of people really kind of hearing that voice of like, come on,
Yeah.
that's yeah, absolutely community.
Yeah. Well, I love that you have a background in it was psychology, is that correct as well?
Hmm.
I just
Hmm.
think that's such a powerful thing, and I'm really curious about how your understanding of herbalism and the nature that we're surrounded in it and are a part of us, how that impacts our mental health as well as our physical health. I know there's a long list of that. Have you seen parallels in those two fields?
In psychology and herbalism,
Yeah.
um, yeah, absolutely. I'm a million. Well, I was in school, and started the program for to be a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and I just something inside me just halted,
Mm,
and I was like, I can't. That's when I dove deeper into being more of a clinical level herbalist,
got it.
because I was working at a boys group home at the time as the therapist there, and this is where ecotherapy. I didn't even have a term for it at the time, but I found one of the most powerful things that I could do with these boys who had either been abused or sexually assaulted, you name it, they neglected, abandoned. These were teenage boys that I can't believe they were still standing, but they
Mm,
were, and they were phenomenal boys. But abandonment just ran deep. You know, they were so scared of losing anyone that did dare care about them. And the most powerful piece of therapy that I found that I could give them is to get them outside as much as possible. It was a place in the woods, and to start teaching them about the earth. And no matter how hard they fell, it was always there to catch them. They would never
Oh,
fall through, and that there was always going to be food around and always going to be medicine. And
mm,
then there will always be the earth there for them. It will never abandon them. And there's just something that it was so simple, but it was so complex that you could just slowly, as we would do this time after time, something would shift in them because they finally had something that they could trust that wouldn't
yes.
disappear. And so I knew there was something there, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, it
Started
makes,
diving into ecotherapy.
yeah, and that makes so much sense because when there has been trauma and so much pain to that level, there it's almost something that I feel like another human can't help heal. It's like
Mhm.
there's something that's a stronger bond, a deeper support, a deeper love, a deeper trust that's in those things that might be one of the only things that can seep in and help rebuild and heal. And you see that it's something that's far deeper than a human offering can provide.
Absolutely. I saw where I was so limited because they wanted to start depending on me, but I was going to go away, you know, and they left. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be there anymore. Or it was the one thing that would never leave them. And yeah,
Something
absolutely.
I really, really love about that too is because we are nature, it's seeing
Hmm.
that that's ourselves too. Like
Yeah,
when I'm seeing that like the earth is always here with me, these trees are always here with me, it's remembering that like I am always here with me too. I'm always going to be able to tend to me, and these other parts of me that can help.
absolutely. And it's so funny you say that. It's been so many years, but I forgot one of my favorite things that we would do is when a really strong storm would come, we would just sit in awe of it and love it and see how
Mm,
nature would just, instead of being like, oh, here's nature mad and scary, it's like, wow, look at nature kind of letting some force out, you know, like,
yeah.
and just admiring that storm and then watching how it settled down and maybe the sun broke back through and there was no shame for that storm needing to come. We needed that rain. We needed that relief,
Yeah.
you know? And so, yeah, seeing themselves, we didn't necessarily connect that back to our own anger, you know, at the
Mhm.
time or our own storms, but yeah, just accepting nature just like it accepts us at all in all ways.
Yeah, I love that. And I love using it as a mirror of like, yes,
Hmm.
I can have these storms too, and I don't need to feel so much shame about it. I'm not going to be that sunshine sky all the time. That's actually
Exactly.
not going to support growth. You know,
We'd
I
be in
need,
drought.
yeah, exactly. So I really love that little mirror reminder. I was wondering, this is like a little bit of my selfish question, but I something I love about the work that you all do is you really empower people, I think, to find the healing that's in your own backyard. So I was wondering
Yeah.
if there's like something that like I can look to when I step out in my backyard. How can I cultivate that deeper relationship? Is there like a herb that commonly grows that I can look to, or a way that we can work with the trees or elements that are already surrounding us to build this relationship in an honoring way.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there definitely needs to be plant wisdom back in every home. It just
Mm-hmm.
should, because it's empowering. Like my mom got a really swollen sore throat this past week, and now she's learned I actually know what I'm talking about. Like
Yeah.
you did after all these years, and she has been for a while, of course. And I was like, okay, what's the pockets look like, just different things, is there any signs of redness, this and that, and it was just a very swollen, irritated throat. And I was like, okay, go to your cabinet, grab some sage, sprinkle it in the water, hot water, make a tea, sprinkle some clove, put a little bit of salt, gargle with it. So, and then it worked. And if that hadn't worked, I'd have her go into the yard and pick plantain and make a
Uh-huh.
tea from that. Herbs and herbal healing is literally all around you at all times.
Yeah.
But where that gets to a level of like study and learning. Like, I think the first step that you can do is to open your mind to becoming that plant person and to being open and removing that plant fear. Because when you were small, it's very likely that you would go pick a plant and someone would have said, oh, don't do that. That might kill you. Or, oh, don't get that. That might, and so like from such a young age, we have plant fear instilled in us or something over there, that bee will sting you, or, just like so
Yeah.
much fear all around you, to where we're just like, we step out in nature and we're just like on alert, and so it's just about stepping into your yard, and your first step is literally just slowly being there long enough that you're not itching and scratching and, and on alert, just becoming comfortable at a park, at even just a grassy patch on the sidewalk, wherever you can get, and just becoming comfortable. Next step would be, if you do have a smartphone, this is going to shock you a bit.
Yeah, I'm
but
curious.
there are some apps that I'm heavily impressed with. It's
Okay.
picture this, but it's kind of expensive, but it's
Okay.
really good. Seek is free,
Okay.
and they have some pretty on-spot plant identification.
Yeah.
I'm usually really impressed, being like, that is actually that plant. Wow.
Wow.
And so if you're sitting next to someone, call these plants someone, of course. If you're sitting next to someone, see who catches your attention. Who's reaching out to you?
Yeah.
Plant ID, find out their name. Okay, and then you probably won't be able to help, but then find out someone else's name and someone else's name and someone else's name.
Yeah.
That's it. But realize, and that's fun, but that's kind of like, when you go to a party and you don't know anybody there, and at first you are so uncomfortable. That's that itchy phase. You're just so uncomfortable and you feel like out of
what
place.
do I do? How do I talk to
What do I
anyone?
do? Where do I put my hands? And so that's that phase of settling in and being like, okay, I can be here. And the next phase is maybe someone comes along and they start being like, hey, that's Jennifer over there. Over there's Kels over there. And they start telling you some names. And you start being like, okay, I know names. It's still pretty surface, but at least you kind of know some names. Maybe Kels really caught your attention. How could you develop a deeper relationship with Kels? Get to know maybe a little something about them, maybe talking to them. So maybe sit there with that plant that you found out was, let's say, fleabane. Sit beside it, look at it, literally just kind of open up the place between your heart and your gut. And it's never your ears that they talk to. It's not your, you might hear whispers in your ears, but it's more in your head, and just see how you feel. Who are they growing next to? Just anything you notice, just notice them in their surroundings and about them. And then we do have access to books and the internet and all kinds. Go see what you can find out about them. And you may be shocked to be like, oh my gosh, that's the plant that was calling to me. You mean fleabane can help control excess bleeding? I've been having incredibly strong periods this past, and not that you necessarily would start trying to bring that in immediately, because it can be very powerful medicine, but that's how it can begin, and because I can't say one plant to go to, because that's me being your expert. That's me making it a shell of itself. It's about you truly forming your own relationships and you becoming comfortable in where you have to be comfortable. You have to get comfortable back out in nature.
Yeah, I love so much of that, because it's really this willingness to be with the discomfort, like opening up, having this beginner's mind, stepping into something in a new way, being willing to be with the discomfort of it until you get to the point where you feel a little bit less, finding comfort in a new space, in a new way. And then I love how you're empowering the person to follow your intuition, go to what's speaking to you, and then just sit with it and kind of let it unfold and evolve and see what happens over time. And that's really, I feel like it is reminding me, and I've said this in this podcast before, but my first mindfulness teacher explained a friend as someone that you spend enough time with, you waste enough time with. And they said mindfulness holds space for you to become friends with yourself. When you're just sitting with yourself, that's how you become your own friend. And I think that's such a beautiful way to become friends with the other parts of you that are outside is just going out there and sitting with them. Like sometimes there's nothing that needs to happen aside from just like, yeah, I'm here with you and you're here with me too. And that's enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where a lot of tree medicine comes in. Why people are so drawn to stand next to trees. They are so powerful, and we pick up on so much of their electromagnetic energy that reaches ours. There is deep healing that takes place literally just being around a tree, and they are healthier when they are in a forest and they're in community. So that healing becomes even deeper when they're even healthier, you know. It yeah, and obviously herbalism can be, and that's what I'm kind of wanting to get to, is it can be as simple as being a plant person. Like, don't let, I hear a lot of people being intimidated by being an herbalist. You don't have to be an herbalist, but everyone should get back in tune with their most whole and natural self and become a plant person to some extent. And then if you just can't help it, then start diving into being an herbalist.
I love that so much.
I don't know that I ever answered your question in the beginning. What is an herbalist? I guess the most basic answer is someone who utilizes whole plant material as medicine. Not homeopathy that like kind of breaks apart poisonous plants and introduces like versus like, not aromatherapy that's, you know, the oils of the plants. It is consuming a whole plant as medicine. That's kind of what just the basics of an herbalist is.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking time to share your wisdom with us today. This has been like, I'm so excited about this. I actually, knowing that I was going to talk to you, signed up for an herbalism class with a friend in Richmond. So I'm really, really excited for that. But I would love if you could share how people can support you in your work and follow you and High Garden and all the things that you are doing to help us better know ourselves by connecting with nature, connecting with this part of ourselves in this way.
Absolutely. Well, we have highgardentea.com if you wanted to come. And it is a website to come purchase our teas. And what my goal for our teas and stuff to be is for you to build your home apothecary. There's everything from if someone has a tummy ache to overworked adrenals to someone sick. It's just this whole little home apothecary that all of my years of herbalism, I've kind of tried to compile into a grouping of items that you can pick and choose your own apothecary. But I didn't want to stop there because herbalism has held me for so long. I want it to hold others as much as possible and share that love. On every item's page, there's called Teaching Herbalism Through Tea Craft. So if you're curious of why every herb is in there, what it's doing to help make that tea potent, I've tried to create a whole teaching page about every single item so you could learn for free a little bit on that. And so that's a lot of the goal of the website, is as a space to go and grab some herbal items and also learn about them. I do teach a lot on social media just because it's the world we live in now. I don't know if it's the healthiest space. It's got its pros and cons, right? But I do a lot on Instagram. We're just at High Garden Tea, and then we got a little TikTok. Granny's on TikTok is what I feel like. I'm like, what's these kids doing?
I'm still trying to figure out TikTok. I'm like,
Oh
if I just make a reel and share it there, does that work?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not the person to ask, but we're also at High Garden Tea there too. And that's just a free space to learn. And then I do have an herbal school. It's the Plant Folk Herbalism program, but it's in person. I can only teach about 20 people a year. And we start taking applications every January. And we have a podcast, like you said, Sipping Teas and Hugging Trees. Our newest ones will be out in a couple of weeks.
Oh, I'm so excited.
It's hard to put these together. I'm so impressed. We have no idea.
It is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but I have been listening to your podcast while I've been in my studio making pots, and that's been a really beautiful experience, like working with the clay, this natural earth element, as I'm learning about these other ones. I've found super healing for myself.
Beautiful. And then honestly, just another way to support us is just love the wild.
Mm.
Quit spraying weeds. Don't just step on every bug you see, like just see the value in life all around you. And I can't even explain. One of my favorite things to do is to save bugs out of the creek.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if any of you have ever, or if we're at a pool, to my son and I, we practice like pulling bugs out that are just struggling for their little lives. And we pull the bugs out and we put them on dry land and we watch them and they take their little buggy arms and they wipe their little buggy faces off and they start
Oh.
cleaning themselves and they just bask in the sun for just a second to draw off. And you can see them just like, I'm okay.
Mm.
And then they finally go off and like, that's what you can do to support a save a bug out of it. It's
Yeah.
just, I don't know. It's just the more, that's where herbalism came in for us, is I couldn't help but think the more that people found value in plants as medicine or plants as food, then they found value in plants. And if you found value in plants, maybe you'll start being interested in creating relationship with plants or protecting the earth, or because honestly, big corporations, the government, there is no larger interest that cares anything about the earth. And I would love to say that there's some good strides being made forward, but there aren't. But we forget how powerful we are as people.
Yes.
Individuals. There's the reason larger companies are starting to greenwash things and even pretend that they're doing stuff green. It's because they're starting to hear our voice of, hey, if you're not being a little bit more green, I'm not too interested in buying your product. And so they're hearing us, and let's keep holding them to it. And because we vote with our dollar, you know what I mean?
We do.
We vote, our dollar is our power, and they may be rich, but combine all our dollars together, and it's a pretty powerful thing. And so the more people care about nature and start and demanding that it be taken care of, because we have to. If we lose all our forest, we don't breathe.
Yeah, you're
No
killing
filtered water.
yourself when you're killing nature.
It's literally, I make that comparison all the time. If we just step on plants and we are disgusted by the wild and we just can't stand to see the dirt outside or something, think about how that reflects on how we view ourselves. And maybe we hold ourselves to this perfectionist standard and we can't stand to see ourselves, any of our dirt or any of our, wild little bit of feral self come out. We have to be so composed all the time. And to embrace the whole is powerful on all fronts. And so, yeah, that's a long-winded way of how you can support us.
Well, I mean, it's probably the truest way, supporting us. That's supporting humanity. That's supporting all life that is a part of all of us.
All of us, yes.
Yeah, and I really love that you're empowering people, because it can feel helpless sometimes when we see all the big things happening, but it does if you just do a better job in your backyard and with the choices you make. That's a ripple effect, and the more of us that are doing that, the more impact we have. And definitely the dollars that you say as well, there are impacts we can make, and it happens one day at a time, one breath at a time, one step at a time.
Absolutely. There's a reason Roundup is pulling, itself from the residential market, because they've been held accountable. Granted, they're still in the commercial market. So yeah, it's not safe for home use, but now it's still going to be sprayed all over your agriculture and all over the produce with Roundup Ready GMOs, even worse. But guess what? The second most profitable one is parks and schools. It's still going to be sprayed there. You know how you stop that? By saying stop it.
Yeah.
Children are incredibly susceptible to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And these playgrounds and stuff are being sprayed with poisons and toxins. No. So just the more people become aware and say no, they have to listen. And you make a huge difference.
Yeah, we got to use our voices and take action on these things.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for advocating for all of us through the work that you do and for all of the nature around us. I'm so appreciative of you, and you've really shifted the way I've been just seeing my backyard and the world around me. And I hope that those who are listening kind of can start to open their eyes to these things as well.
Well, thank you, Holly. Thank you so much for having me. And I love how you put stuff. You are You are a maestro with words.
Thank you. I so appreciate you. And this was just such a gift for me. I feel like a little fangirl. I've like been obsessed with your teas and your work for
Aw.
so long, and I'm just so grateful that we got to have this conversation today.